Hi, Vanessa Roche here, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about diversity in the classroom when it comes to kids on the autism spectrum. Most people think diversity in the classroom means that you're going to have different races and different cultures, but what about those neurotypical and atypical kids? And what it means to be the primary teacher to autism kids within your own classroom that don't necessarily need a para or anything like that. So I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about how you can make them feel a little bit more comfortable in your classroom. First, acknowledge the elephant in the room. Acknowledge that they have a form of autism and that it comes with many different aspects. They can have sensory processing disorder, they can have ADHD or ADD, and have some texture issues or feelings of like snacks or anything like that in their mouth. So some things that you might have to look forward to that maybe aren't your typical hurdles with other children. Another thing is that you want your room to be inviting to everyone. So whenever you greet them like you would everybody else. And that means acknowledging them as a person, not as their diagnosis. And so this gives them a sense of belonging and a sense of community within the classroom, and that they know that their place and that they're held to the same requirements and expectations as their classmates. Moving forward into the gifts of autism. Now, there are going to be autistic kids in your class that may not be verbal. Some may have limited skills with verbal communication. Others, you really can't even tell that they are autistic until you start getting into their social behaviors or their quirks. And those kids all have something in common, and that is what we call the gifts of autism. Studies have reflected that almost every child on the spectrum of autism has some kind of gift, whether it be the love of reading or music. These children are endowed with gifts that most of their peers aren't on the same level as. Even if the child is nonverbal, self-abusive, and in a wheelchair, I bet you he can know every single step to playing Mozart. So what does that mean for you as a teacher? Acknowledge those gifts, use them as reward systems, and look how you can incorporate those into your everyday lesson plans that maybe give them a little bit extra. While not every single autistic student in your classroom is going to need a parent, they're still going to need a little bit more guidance. So if you have things like flowcharts or graphic organizers or Venn diagrams that help narrow down the noise in your classroom and lay out your expectations adequately in front of them to where they have multiple tools to use that don't necessarily require you to be standing over them, those are going to give them those individual skills sets that they need to be able to figure out what's going on their own without having to use so much scaffolding. They will also mirror you. So your actions are so important. Way you tolerate the situations that come up in your class and how you communicate about them, all of those things they're going to interpret as how you would react to them. So they may become hyper emotional. As most teenage kids and early teenage kids are fused with hormones anyways, adding autism into that means that they are hypersensitive. So what you think is maybe being direct or giving advice could come off a little invasive or embarrassing to them. So really be cautious of how you speak to your student. Get to know them, see what they love and what they don't love, and try to see if you can incorporate that in your conversation with them about their social life. So that way that they have a reference to go to. Not all of them get sarcasm, empathy, or any of that. And I'm not saying that it's most, I'm saying not all of them. A lot of children on the spectrum have great empathy. In fact, they have probably more empathy And so they convey their feelings sometimes in bouts of frustration and maybe even some violence, or blurting out, or standing up, or crying, or leaving the room. And those are ways for you to be able to communicate with your administrators and have kind of like a balance of what do I do in this instant, and allow the student to take time when needed and don't pressure them. The next thing I'm going to talk about is probably the most important, and that is get a solid base of information from their parents. Ask their parents, how do you deal with this when they're at home? Have those open communications and tell their parents through like cloud or whatever remind systems that you can use for technology, Schoology, all of these great systems that we have in place to really talk about how they deal with things at home so that you can implement those tools within your classroom. And also it really is important on a social level for everyone to feel that sense of belonging. It's one of the hierarchy needs from Maslow for a reason. And that is because, especially when you feel like no one else is like you want that sense of normality. So being able to have level playing grounds when it comes to collaborative groups and the expectations of them while they're dealing with their peers can also really help them understand what it means to be part of the group. Another part is that you really want to look at how they write. Many of them tend to be super intelligent and have a wild imagination that is only captured in the written word, and it can get really fun. And so I encourage you also, whenever they're in those moments of frustration, to have them just write it down, challenge them, tell them, hey, I look forward to seeing your ideas and how you can bring that knowledge into the classroom and maybe help other friends too. Okay, so I hope that really kind of narrowed down the expectations of having a atypical neuro person with autism in your normal classroom. I look forward to hearing your conversations that you have with your atypical kids, and I hope that this helped. Bye.